Happy Thursday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand, and it is perfect.
So, when thinking about mechanisms of change and restoring relative motion, there seems to be a point where you lose the improvement in relative motion and you begin to drive like compensatory action to increase force production, like when somebody starts wincing, holding their breath, and whatnot. Um, my question pertains more so to the mechanism of change and how do you know the stimulus you're providing is doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Okay, so um, I would argue that we never really know what the mechanism of change is.
Right.
Okay, because we associate that with an intervention and the intention, and then what are the probabilities? So number one, to identify whether you're getting the change that you want, you got to know what change it is that you're shooting for, right? Okay. So you have to have an intention first and foremost. Then you have to intervene in some way, shape, or form based on whatever it is that you've got in your head as a representation of what this person is capable of doing, how the system interacts, right? And that's whatever model that you use. And then you apply the intervention, and then you retest and you say, okay, that was good, I'll do more of that. Or that was not good, I need to not do more of that. So there's a lot of all of these things that we do that are determined just through the interaction. Because again, we're not predictive, outside of a small range of behaviors. We're not very predictive, and people aren't very smart, right? We just don't know stuff. So the way that we figure stuff out is we do something and we see what happens. But and we can discuss mechanisms, right? There's a lot of influences. We can talk about the nervous system, we can talk about pressures, and we can talk about volumes and fluid shifts and sensory inputs and all of that, right? But when are they not active? Like every single one of them is active all the time. You just don't know which one you're influencing the most. And I I always say this, it's like I don't know why my patients get better. I just play probabilities. And if you can get comfortable thinking that way, then you'll do a whole lot better. But if you start thinking that you're, changing tissues when you're not changing tissues, and if that's your model, then you fail a lot, because the chances of you changing that in some acute way is slim to none. Right? That's why you'll hear me use the word behaviors, because behaviors change instantaneously based on context, right? You have constraints. Some of them are the physical structural constraints that do change, but they change over a long period of time. And then you have the stuff that is, like I said, practically instantaneous. When you talk about neurotransmitter release and just, again, emotion and behavior, that stuff changes instantly. And movement has a very strong element of that type of behavior. That's why we can change it quickly, thankfully. Otherwise we'd be kind of screwed. So what position would you expect to see at the highest level of force production into the ground? What would be your thought process on that?
A compressive strategy, inside edge.
Yeah.
strategy?
Well, okay. So you have, so here's the rule. I have to push into the ground really, really hard, which means that I have to have some measure of internal rotation, which is my downward force into the ground. Can you do that in a supinated foot? You can, it's just not very effective, right?
Your potential would be higher, right? Like
In a supinated foot?
to then compress? Then isn't IR happens in an ER space? So if you start
If
supinated,
you're externally rotated, you're moving away from the ground. So that means you're not putting maximum force into the ground.
okay, so starting with more of a compressive strategy would from the get-go, not start.
So it'll change by position as well, won't it? Like there's movement during the activity, right? Depending on what I'm doing. Again, it's like how stressful is this activity? How hard is it for you to break a deadlift off the ground? It's like that's going to determine how much effort you put into. It's going to determine how much position you need to acquire to produce that force. But you're always going to apply force in the ground with a degree of internal rotation. Where it comes from varies. How much varies. So there's not one. What we have to understand is how the segments are influenced through the motion based on load, based on technique, right? Everybody wants to chase like they want one, they want the answer. I don't think there is other than simple rules of you got to push into the ground. Okay. What if you had a supinated foot and you still need internal rotation? Do you think you can acquire it somewhere else?
Mhm.
Of course you can. All I got to do is tip my pelvis farther forward. Now I've got more internal rotation because that's a down force, right? Even though I've got a crappy supinated foot, but the supinated foot's going to be a limiting factor because it's not going to allow me to maximize my pressure into the ground.
Mhm.
So you see how the influences interact,
Mhm.
right? A high force foot, like if we're maximizing the force into the ground, is going to have a lower arch, and you're going to be biased towards producing an internal rotation force, which is very, very difficult to do if I'm on the lateral aspect of the calcaneus, because that would bias me towards ER. IR is my force producing position. So it would stand to reason that I would see more IR. How much? I don't know. Who are we talking about? How hard is it for them? Is it above their threshold where they can't maintain a certain foot position, right? And so there's an advantage to understanding this, because now you can just watch a client move and do something, and you can identify like when are they really driving these internal rotation forces rather aggressively, because now you can start to identify where their thresholds are, and you can say that was a really good lift, but I don't think we want to go any farther today. So then it becomes very, very useful. But if you say it should be this, it should be that, I think you identify what is, and then you determine whether it is appropriate for the circumstance.
It's not so much off topic, but real quick,
dude,
I thought it.
This is a coffee call. There is no off topic.
I just wanted to say it was so cool about the configurations, especially with martial arts. And then Michael just mentioned Jordan Burroughs, like with wrestlers, why they're always short, wide, and stocky. It just makes so much sense versus like those long guys who are like have a certain style.
Yeah.
It's just really cool. You apply it to any sport.
Well, yeah, that's that. See, okay, watch the Olympics. Okay, you're talking about the athletes at the highest level that are highly specialized. And why are they like why did the figure skaters pick figure skating? Well, there was thousands of little girls that picked figure skating, but only 3 of them had the right body type that could take them far enough, right? If you look at the Olympic swimmers, they all look the same. Big giant hands, big giant feet, short legs, big long torsos with scapulae that are oriented into ER. That's how you get the shoulder motion, right? And so again, the configuration determines what you're going to be good at.
That was my light bulb moment of the call.